Last Wednesday, we showed some of the key messages from the latest report on the current state of climate change science from the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, or IPCC. Today, I'd like to dive a little deeper using some of the graphics from this report, the sixth in the IPCC's 33-year history, and the first since 2013. Now, the new report updates a graph of global temperature over time that first appeared 20 years ago. Now, the original went back about 1,000 years and was nicknamed the hockey stick because of the shape of the graph. Now, in the update, the long end of the stick now goes back about 2,000 years, while warming over the last 20 years makes the blade of the stick longer. The wideness of the graph prior to 1850 indicates the uncertainty of reconstructing temperatures from the distant past. But even with that uncertainty, the recent warmth is unprecedented over the last 2,000 years. So how do we know the warming isn't natural? Well, some of the strongest evidence comes from comparing the temperature forecasts from a set of climate models with only natural forcing, such as volcanoes. Those are the green curves here, with a set of simulations that also includes human forcing, such as increasing carbon dioxide. Now, those results are shown in tan. The squiggly black line is the observed temperatures. And only the simulations that include human forcing, the tan, overlap the observed temperatures over the last 50 to 100 years or so. As for future warming, it depends a lot on how much more carbon dioxide we put in the air. The new report considers 5 scenarios. They're called Shared Socioeconomic Pathways, SSPs for short. At one extreme, CO2 emissions climb sharply most of the rest of the century. But longer-term trends are suggesting a turn away from burning coal, so that's probably unlikely. At the other extreme are scenarios in which emissions fall 50% from current levels by the year 2035, that's the light blue curve, or 50% by 2050, that's the dark blue line. Those are probably too optimistic. The most likely scenarios are in yellow and red here, SSP 2 and 3, or somewhere in between them, with SSP 2 showing a decrease in emissions starting around 2050, and SSP 3 showing emissions growing slowly through the end of the century. So here's the IPCC's assessment of the most likely additional warming under those 2 scenarios. I've rounded these ranges to the nearest degree, and remember, this is on top of the warming of 1.5 to 2 degrees that's already occurred. In the next 20 years, the scenarios are similar, another 1 to 2 degrees of warming. By mid-century, they diverge a bit, on the high end agreeing that 3 more degrees of warming is most likely. And finally, by the last 20 years of the century, the extra warming is 2 to 5 degrees on the low end, 4 to 7 degrees on the high end, where emissions are still growing late in the century. And still to come from the IPCC over the next few months are parts 2 and 3 of their report, including new assessments on climate change impacts, adaptation, and mitigation. Stay with us. The extended forecast is next.